Hello! Another week rolls to an end, and here we are. Usual place, usual idiots, trying to make sense of the world. So you really oughtn't take them too seriously, because none of us knows what we're talking about. Looks like we're about to make a pink drink.
Well, it looks pink, but I promise you that it's not pink. We're going to have a Campari Spritz. So the Campari part of it is this, it's based on a Italian liquor. It comes in two incarnations, a bitter and a sweet version. And this is the bitter version. So even though it's going to make our drinks look pink, it's by no means
So in your wisdom, we're having pink drinks.
No, we're not having pink drink. So it's basically made of alcohol and water infused with herbs and fruit, and it's got a bitter taste if you're going to have it neat. And a spritz is basically a Venetian wine-based cocktail. So the Campari part comes from the Campari, and normally in Italy what they have it with is an Italian sparkling wine, Prosecco. But that's hard to come by in this part of the world. So
well, I can tell you where to get Prosecco, and it's actually not very expensive in Zim.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's real Prosecco, but anyway.
Yeah. So what I got instead is a South African sparkling wine. Graham Beck, they make decent wines, and this one is the Ultra Brut. So they don't add any sugar. It's the driest incarnation of the Brut. And
whoa.
So
I'm a bit concerned with your proficiency at that particular move there.
Well, I have a little brother that likes popping bottles, so I've picked up a few things from him. So normally they add soda water or tonic water, but
you just want to make sure that we get really drunk.
The more generous barmen dispense with the soda water or tonic water and just add sparkling wine. So this is a very popular. Yeah?
The smell is very promising.
So
at the same time, rather ominous.
And I chose this because it's a very popular summer drink in Southern Europe, even though it's of Italian origin. They love having this in summer all over Southern Europe, and apparently it's an aperitif as well. Although I saw lots of people having it after lunch. So I hope you like it. Yeah.
Well, the sparkling wine is overpowering, though. Eh?
Well, we can always add a bit more Campari. And
I don't think this will end well.
Comes with
I think this is where we need
orange.
This is where we need to shift to restore order. But
cheers.
Cheers, eh? I like it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite cocktails, and it's good to celebrate the beginning of summer with.
You know, I'm really starting to like your new dress sense.
Oh, thank you, George. Not that
I know you're going to blame the weather, but it's good. Navy, white, black. These are normal colors.
Still colorblind, but that's okay.
What is not navy or black out of what you're wearing?
Well, he's wearing black pants.
Yeah.
Okay, and a white shirt. Okay.
Is this white?
What color is it?
No, it's not white. It's some cream version of white. Clearly, he's working very hard in meeting important people who
wouldn't appreciate.
He can't be shocked with his hippie
ice cream colored pants.
It's not hippie. I never wear hippie, but that you describe it as hippie, yes. I think says it all. Yeah. In all matters sartorial, please, leave it to me.
And you're even wearing black socks.
Well, dark socks.
Normal socks.
These are not black socks, but anyway.
He's wearing dark colored socks.
You actually dressed more colorfully than him.
Yes, well, I'm learning all the wrong lessons from him, it seems.
I never wear hats indoors, but anyway.
Anyway, what are you drinking?
So I'm having Ethiopian Arabica, premium Arabica coffee, and yeah, great. I made it myself. I'm proud.
So unpack this for me, because you're a teetotaler and you are an insomniac. How are you also into coffee?
Well, that's only if you're drinking coffee in the evening, right? But usually I have coffee, and I don't have that much coffee, but I tend to have coffee in the mornings.
Well, this
we're
is
not filming
certainly
in the
not
morning.
This is
morning.
for the show. I'm doing this
Oh,
for
right.
the
Oh,
show.
blame the show.
Yeah.
So you're
And
making
tomorrow is a Saturday.
You're
So
making
I'll
an
blame-
immense
I'll blame-
sacrifice for the show.
I'll blame
Exactly.
the, I'll
Thank you so
blame
much.
the, I'll blame the show for my excessive drinking. And what are we having?
We're having a Campari Spritz, which is obviously, as usual, much more interesting than what Tinashe is having. We did a side where we explained what this is. Apparently we did that last episode as well, but our producer didn't put it in the show. So hopefully this time around.
Yes, we pre-recorded the pouring of the Campari Spritz. So it's been an interesting week. A lot has been in the news. But before we get to what's been in the news this week, our publisher, ZFN, publishes a Today in History article every day. And going through it, we are more and more coming to the conclusion that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Some of the headlines in years gone by in similar weeks. In 2007, on the 22nd of August, the Zimbabwean government made an ambitious target of 120 million kgs of tobacco in the following farming season. That's aged well. This year
we're
this
not
year we're
doing
going to do over 200.
265.
Yeah.
260 something.
So something worked there, or did something work?
Well, that forecast was horribly off at the time. It just turns out that 10 years later.
In 2009, 19 August 2009, Zimbabwe's government said it had secured 1 billion to transform the country's main highway running from Beitbridge to Chirundu.
Oh, that never happened.
2009. That's 13 years later?
Yeah.
Well, no. Well, they're doing a bit of the Beitbridge Road now. Well, they're doing the Beitbridge
Yeah, now.
Harare Road.
Well, the project is Beitbridge Chirundu, but progress has been slow, and we had this epiphany that we could go through life without paying suppliers. So it'll be interesting to see how that project progresses
But-
in that-
but
in the
my-
context of not paying the supplier.
My personal favorite. 18 August 2016. Government should be guided by
18
factual
August
data.
of which year?
2016.
Okay.
Government should be guided by factual data and statistics when crafting policies, instead of relying on guesswork. Who do you think said that?
Somebody who would never join government.
The Minister of Finance.
The then Barclays Bank of Zimbabwe Limited Managing Director,
Oh my.
George Gomatanga. So in coming weeks, we'll try and dig up some of these things. We're not digging them up. ZFN will, and we will look at whatever ZFN digs up for us and see what might be interesting.
Fate
Well,
loves
you know
irony.
what they say. Well, you know what they say. They say history does not repeat itself,
It rhymes.
but it rhymes.
Yeah. Anyway, so in the actual news this week, the government has said that it's going to list bonds to pay the former white farmers. So you guys may remember, maybe about this time last year, or a bit longer,
Sorry, could you repeat that, because that's interesting.
the government is going to list bonds. They're going to give the farmers bonds.
So it turns out we owe white commercial farmers who owned land before land reform a few $1 billion.
We voluntarily offered them 3.5 billion, and if we didn't pay them on time, we'd pay them 5 billion.
Improvements. Okay, not the actual land, but the improvements. And surprise, surprise, along with a lot of our foreign creditors, we have failed miserably to make good on our commitments to pay them.
On our self-imposed deadline.
And the solution that's proposed here, which I find very objectionable, by the way, at two levels, philosophically and just in terms of where we are, just in terms of the finance. Pragmatically. Why do we owe such an amount? And if we're going to raise money in global capital markets for anything, surely we have other priorities before we pay.
Are these international bonds or these are local bonds?
So the idea is to raise
International stock exchanges.
Yes, so this is global capital markets. We want to go on to.
So we're going to give the farmers a piece of paper that says we'll pay you in X number of years.
And I owe you.
And then we're going to take those pieces of paper and take them to London or to New York or Frankfurt or wherever and put them on a stock exchange. so that the farmers can sell these to British or German or Canadian investors?
Well, actually, it's not going to work quite that way, but something along those lines.
You're unusually quiet.
I mean, I don't understand why we're talking about this. That's what I'm trying to get to. Like, why are we discussing this?
It's in the news, and it's interesting.
No, we don't discuss things because they're in the news. Otherwise, we'll be wasting our time. We discuss things because
so you feel quite strongly that this is a waste of time, this discussion.
Honestly.
Elaborate. Why do you think discussing the government raising money?
Well, it's not going to happen. It's a pie in the sky, and it's not. There are real pertinent issues that we need to discuss, and this is not one of them.
Okay, fine.
This is what it goes under the basket government wish list.
Okay,
right?
fine.
Maybe let's discuss it in 12 years' time as today in history.
Look, but
what did you have for lunch?
Look, I tend to
terrible food actually.
Yeah,
you're making it worse.
Look, I tend to agree with you that it's a pie in the sky, but I think that it opens the door to discussion about where we are in terms of our standing with global creditors and in the context of global capital markets, right? To say, why is it? Let's remind ourselves. Why is it that we can't raise any money in global capital markets? And what do we need to do to be able to raise money? And if we were
rated,
and if we were in a position,
if
to raise money,
we'd have a junk status. But
no, we're not.
We are below junk.
We're below junk.
We're below junk.
We can't be credit rated.
Right. And if we were in a position to raise money on global capital markets, would it if you were to create a top 10 list of issues that we want to fund, would paying commercial farmers for improvements be in that top 10 list?
We're in a debt trap, so it would never happen again.
Okay, I have a different question because I think you guys are going down a rabbit hole. Whatever you both had for lunch, please don't ever have it again.
I've been fasting, so
maybe you should eat something. But
now you're drinking alcohol.
Okay, children. But clearly, this is a problem. This issue of concluding the land reform. What would be a better way of solving this issue than these IOUs and these numerous promises? What would be the best way to close this chapter?
Create a land bank. All the farmers that are on the land, the black farmers that are on land, should start paying, and they pay directly into a fund that pays directly to the white farmers.
Why would you? Okay, so assuming it's a good idea to start a land bank, who would own it and run it?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No, it matters.
No. You're going down a rabbit hole.
You're actually missing the point.
You're going down a rabbit hole. So the important point that you're making is the beneficiaries must pay for the land.
Yes.
He never made that point.
You weren't listening
because you were not listening.
You're saying over a period of time, the beneficiaries must pay for the land.
Why it must be through a bank is because then you're offering a mortgage to the new farmer.
The new owner.
So it's the land bank that pays out the old farmer, and then it gets its revenue.
I have a different perspective.
Over a longer period of time.
I believe all the beneficiaries of land reform should get title to their land, and that title should be encumbered by the value of the improvements on that land. So they should be, you're married.
How's this different from what Sinashi just said?
But there's no bank involved, right? There's nobody putting their hand up and saying, I'm the one who's going to fund or pay for this.
Okay,
right?
that's a minor point, though,
the bank is actually critical.
It's just a mechanism.
The bank is
but you guys are getting in a rabbit hole. It's just a mechanism. But you're both agreeing that by some mechanism, there must be a transfer of title from the white farmers to the new farmers.
That already happened, right? The white farmers don't have title.
No, the white farmers hold their title deeds. The title deeds haven't been cancelled.
Well, it turns they haven't been cancelled.
They haven't been cancelled.
Just cancel.
And the black farmers don't have title deeds. But you're both agreeing that let's transfer the title and let's have a mechanism by which the black farmers pay for the improvements they inherited.
Yes, but what I also want to remove is this idea.
You cannot do anything outside of banking system.
What I also want to remove, right, which I think is muddled by the idea of a land bank, is this idea that the state is somehow...
I didn't say state.
Involved in the
has an obligation to these white farmers.
Oh no, it does. It actually has.
I think the beneficiaries.
The state has an obligation. But
How can the state not have an obligation? The state is the one that expropriated.
Yeah.
Okay, except in a few crazy cases, the black guy didn't show up and kick off the white farmer. What happened was the state kicked off the white farmer and allocated the land to a black farmer.
And still holds the right to allocate to whomsoever
It
they want.
wishes in future.
Okay, fair enough.
So why you need a bank is because within the banking system, so if you do it outside of the banking system, there's certain benefits that you won't accrue. But when you do it through the banking system, there's certain benefits where you can actually, the land bank can actually become much bigger, can create credit, can do all sorts of things, can give credit, can discount that. So the land bank can go internationally.
But you know what my
and
intuitive
discount all that.
problem is with the land bank? Is you have, in our country, a government that has built many institutions that are inefficient and effectively don't work.
But it doesn't have to be owned by the government. It doesn't have to be owned by the
It doesn't
government.
have to be
That's
owned
why
by
I asked.
government.
It matters. Remember, I mentioned
No.
who.
It can be owned by a trust. It can be a constitutional body. It can be anything.
Could be private, actually. Because this is a simple, straightforward transaction. But unfortunately, the government is involved because it has the guarantee. It's the one that's actually holding.
But what is that guarantee worth?
Well, it's the one that's actually, right now it's worth zero because it's the one that's actually holding all land is state land.
All right. Okay, we're back to you being a 6-year-old. So let's explain it to you as a 6-year-old. So what Tinashe is saying, and you both agree, is title must transfer from the former white farmers to the new black farmers. The new black farmers must pay for their title to the former white farmers over time. What Tinashe is further saying is there is a white farmer who has his title deeds in a suitcase, under a mattress, in a bank in London, somewhere, who says, but why must I give them to you? Why must I give these title deeds to the new black farmer? And somebody has to stand in between and say, if you release those title deeds to the new black farmer, I will make sure you get paid.
Today.
Or over time, or whatever. This is my promise, and I'm the guarantor of this agreement between you. So we are now transforming an expropriation into a willing buyer, willing seller transaction that is underwritten by somebody who's credible. And Tinashe is suggesting that that credible person who underwrites the transaction could be the state.
No,
It
the land
has
bank.
to
You're
be.
saying it's the land bank.
The land bank.
the land bank is a place where it happens.
Where it happens, but it must, because the state right now owns the land.
And the state has vested in itself the power to reallocate. So
Yeah.
the black farmer is also saying, but wait, you want to give me a 10-year obligation or a 25-year obligation to pay for this land? And after year 3, you
You're
take
not paying
it
for the land. You're paying for the improvements.
improvements.
Yeah.
Okay. But after 3 years, you take it away from me and give it to someone else. So the only person who has the power to stand in between
Right now.
everybody
Unfortunately,
is the state.
So we're back to 1890. Sorry.
How did we get back to 1890?
What did you put in your coffee?
No,
Let me explain. Let me explain. why
Please,
we're back to
whoever
1890.
had lunch with Tinashe,
We're-
please.
So we're back to 1890, where there was no title, right? And you then had to vest all rights in the Queen, and then the Queen had to issue our title. That's all I'm saying. That right now, all the rights vest in the state, whether we like it or not. Today, they all vest in the state, so it has to be the state that must give. But the mechanism I'm suggesting is it has to be through a land bank, and the land bank can actually be privately owned, because then now the land bank can go offshore or go wherever and say, well, we have potential 11 million hectares of land that we own, and these
that
are
are
the cash
mortgaged to
flows
us.
that are mortgaged to us, and we need the cash today, and then they get cash today, and then they give it to the farm or the previous farm owners.
And I think if we're gonna develop this idea and discuss it further, if we've learned anything from the currency board discussion, names are important. And if Rufaro is getting his knickers in a knot
Don't wear knickers.
that's the point. Over the word land bank. perhaps that's going to prove to be an emotive word in the discussion.
It's
And we-
surprising, it's obvious, but people get
Yes, but
worked up by simple things.
But
It's a land bank.
But words matter. But basically, what we're talking about is an institution or a mechanism by which this transfer can be transferred and compensation can be given, and the whole process can be underwritten by somebody who has the capacity to underwrite the process.
And it's been done elsewhere. You will find that there will be lots of investors, to your point, there'll be actually lots of international investors who are willing to invest in a land bank.
But there has to be the correct legal and policy framework, which is missing.
That's why the state has to be there.
Laws are made by people. So if we all sit and we agree this is what we want, and it's happened, there's precedent in this country where Parliament has sat late into the night to make a law. It can be done.
Or to impeach someone.
Anyway, what if
You remember?
whatever you had for lunch? But anyway, this is assuming that there is philosophical and political agreement on the issuance of title to the new farmers.
So you know the fantastic thing that's actually happening in Zimbabwe, and I'm glad that we've now veered into this discussion and not the earlier discussion.
No, you were just grumpy.
So the fantastic thing that has actually happened is it's no longer a philosophical question, it's now a practical question. So the other problem is if you're giving people 99-year leases and this transfer of title hasn't happened because the old white farmer, as you correctly say, still owns title to the land. It might be useless, but
Did you say it might be useless?
Yeah, well, I mean, like
Well, it's still
you've
a
got
little bit
factual,
useful.
it's useless.
So it turns out that the white farmer still has bargaining power at this
He
point.
does? Or she
Yes.
does?
because he's got the title.
Yes.
No.
They
But anyway,
actually
let him
still
make his
have
point.
a
Make your
bargaining-
point.
So they still have bargaining power. That's why you had the $3.5 billion.
Can you make
It's
your
because
point?
what
Because
should
we need to get to
happen?
the end of the segment.
Okay, yeah. Because what should happen is
You're not
there must be a
making point. You're going down
transfer.
rabbit hole.
No,
No, okay.
okay,
I'm
go
going
on.
to be a little bit patient with him.
Yeah, no, I don't know
who
what
gave
this
you the
guy is
power?
getting.
Anyway.
You know, he's just going on and on. Because for the title to change hands, they have to cede their rights.
They do?
They haven't. The white farmers
No.
haven't
I'm saying they
ceded
do.
the
Why?
rights.
Why do they have to cede anything?
So they're saying pay us and then we'll cede our rights. That's why it's become a practical matter rather than a philosophical matter.
No, but okay. I'm going to push
So
back
even
and
if
be a
the
devil's
state-
advocate, right? And I'm going to take a very hard line position to say, well, hypothetically, right? What if you had a state that had been very hardline and said, no, you know what? Actually, we don't even owe you for those improvements. Those title deeds are worthless, and you can cry to whoever you like. But as far as we're concerned, as Zimbabwe, the state now owns all this land.
Okay.
Look,
but do you know
think-
that land issues, white land issues, carry on for hundreds of years? Because the white farmer, it turns out that in 50 years' time, the white farmer could come back to the state. That's why the state was forced to do this deal, because the white farmer still has some rights.
I think we're wading into a legal rabbit hole because we could quote all sorts of cases. Angola is an interesting one where it's happening right now, but I don't think we're experts to explain why legally.
You know what's happening in Angola?
No.
Okay, when the revolution happened in 1975, the white guys were kicked out and there was no title. Like within the city center, they removed title. Now the white guys are now saying, hey,
They're showing up and claiming their land back and they're getting compensated. So, but I think we need a legal expert to help us
Okay,
work
fair
through
yeah,
that.
fair enough. Fair enough. But we know enough.
But,
at a very
but the
macro
point I thought you
level.
were going to make when you started to go into the 99-year leases is recently now the banks. So we've been told that the government and the banks have agreed on the 99-year leases, but the banks have now come out and said, no. As long as there are continued farm invasions, the 99-year lease is not worth much to us, because whatever you've written in there, which is kind of what you're saying, that it doesn't actually matter that you're holding a piece of paper. What's mattering at the moment when it comes to land in this country is not rule of law, but rule of might. So no matter what piece of paper you're holding, if somebody with a club or a gun,
Have you seen an offer letter? Do you know what it says at the bottom in bold?
At the discretion of the minister.
Yeah, he holds the right.
So if he has a bad lunch like you,
and the minister serves, and the minister serves,
and you.
and the minister serves at the pleasure of the president, and the president is elected every 5 years. So the whole thing becomes extremely unpredictable. So I'm not sure we've actually come up with a solution. So what are we saying?
Look, I think he's articulated it. I think we the detail, land bank or no land bank, that's a rabbit hole. But I think fundamentally we agree that we need to issue title, right? This idea that
title must transfer.
It must transfer.
Yeah.
To issue title assumes we're back in 1890.
Yeah, we're not.
Well, effectively, title has already transferred from the white farmers to the government, and it needs to then.
It turns out it hasn't.
Okay.
They're holding their title deeds that are not cancelled. And even the new farms are legally described as subdivisions of the old title.
Okay, so the title issue must be resolved. And then we can have an honest discussion about the liability for improvements and how to raise money to fund it.
He's articulated very well. That's why it's no longer a philosophical question. It's now a practical question. So we need practical men to resolve this.
You're not him. We're going to go for a break now and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Hey, indlala, hey. Bazasibulala ngendlala wanhlaba.
Andikho ukubikileko.
Asabe.
Imukubike makabeji.
Ngifuna usibulalisa ngendlala, eh?
Kwethe sekuru. Bayeza bayenyaradzo bayathatha imali. Bayabuya kathesi nje so.
Ngoyida kunyaraza.
Wonke sekuru.
The Sawira Connect card, connecting you to an easier and more convenient way to receive your funeral grocery allowance. Wipe away delays. Say goodbye to payment interruptions with just one simple swipe, 24/7. The Sawira Connect card made for your convenience. Anytime, anywhere. Access made easy. For more information, connect with us today.
And we're back. Are you suitably refreshed?
I am.
Or relieved?
Refreshed.
You look
On an empty stomach.
Oh, please.
You're looking a bit shiny though tonight.
Where's the makeup lady?
Well, she's within your mood today. Anyway, so this week cabinet, and as far as I could tell, for the first time in a very long time, was open and honest with us and said 3.8 million people.
Are you saying they've been lying all this time?
Particularly, I didn't say they've been lying, but it's the first time in a while that we've heard the government telling us how many people are at risk of food insecurity. And the number is quite concerning, 3.8 million people in the country. They then went on to say, well, we've got 490,000 tons in the food reserve, of which 190,000 tons will be set aside for these food insecure people. And a few questions come to mind. The first question is,
is food insecure a euphemism for they could starve?
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, if we harvested 1.1 million a few months ago, and we're already down to 490, will the 490 carry us to the next harvest? And if it can't, how are we going to pay for what we need? The second question is, we've just been talking about land reform, and 22 years later, we can't feed 3.8 divided by 15 is what percentage? Almost 25% of our population. About 20% of our population. We can't feed them. Did land reform work?
Why are we talking about agriculture? But just to correct your numbers, according to the World Bank, 49% of Zimbabweans live under extreme poverty. So they are food insecure. So it's actually, the number is much more.
Oh, sorry, the 3.8 are rural people as a result of the drought.
Yes, exactly. So you need to be very specific there. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that was first of all.
Wow. Your other points don't make any sense at all.
But I think
they don't make any sense.
I think he raises an interesting issue, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's actually 20 years, not 22, since land reform.
22 years, that's what he said.
Yeah.
He's disputing 22.
Oh, you're saying it's not 22?
Land reform?
2000.
2000. Okay, so it's been 2 decades.
That long.
Right? And we still find ourselves in a place where we've got, number one, 3.8 million people, to use the politically correct language, food insecure, right? And then the vast majority of everybody else involved in farming in our country is utterly dependent on the state to give them seed, to give them fertilizer, and all sorts of freebies for them to actually do the farming. Are these the hallmarks of successful land reform?
Well, we've had bad weather.
So land reform was phenomenal, except we've had a bunch of bad weather, so the outcomes this year are not great, and we need to pump in all this money. Is that the case you're trying to make?
Yes.
That's perfectly plausible to you?
Well, I'm putting across a different argument.
Well, I would posit a different argument. I think that land reform, whatever you think about whether it was right or wrong philosophically, was executed in such an atrocious fashion that we have been poorer as a country since it happened. And we need to pump all this value into agriculture for results that are not impressive by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you look at the yields, if you look at our production, it's poor. And over and above that, you have a significant percentage of the population that is in the farming community that needs handouts to avert famine. It strikes me as a really harsh indictment of land reform and the 20 years of policy after the initial dramatic expropriation of land, right? Because whether or not you agree with the manner in which land was expropriated, right, we've had 20 years of opportunities to course correct, increase productivity, make it efficient, make us again the breadbasket of SADC in sub-Saharan Africa, but we failed. So my perspective is, and I could be wrong, or I'm happy for you guys to challenge me. My perspective is that it's a massive indictment on land reform to find ourselves in this place where 3.8 million people need food aid, and to this day we're still subsidizing farming.
Could it have been done differently?
Of course.
If we assume that it had to be done,
yeah,
could it have been done differently?
Look, I was having a conversation earlier, and I gave this analogy, of a pregnant woman in theater trying to give birth. Okay, and sometimes a natural birth might be preferred, but not possible. And the gynecologist will step in and say, you know what, we're going to have a C-section. Yeah. And if that individual is a professional and knows what they're doing, most of the time these things are successful. What will never work, right, is a scenario in which a natural birth is failing, right, and instead of getting a gynecologist to come in and perform a C-section, you have a butcher come in on the basis that they cut meat all the time and they understand veins and all these things to do with animals, and they know how to cut and get the baby out, right? If you have a butcher do a C-section, the results will be worse than if you didn't have any help at all.
Okay, coming back to the land reform.
and I think and it's a dramatic example, and I chose it deliberately because we utterly butchered land reform. We could have done it so much better.
I'm more practical today. I would simplify the argument. Just because somebody is white and they're racist and they're all these bad things. And my analogy is, it doesn't matter whether your doctor is a racist, is white, and has this litany of vices, is when you need to be operated, that's the doctor you rely on. So we
Because
had
they're
people,
competent.
Because they're competent. We had people who were very good at one thing, which was actually quite unique in the world, right? That you had these white farmers who were very good at farming. Never mind that they were racist. And unfortunately, as a society, we can't keep two thoughts at the same time, you know. So we need to be, we're invaded by one thought and we act on that impulse that these guys are racist. So it doesn't matter that they're actually producing food for the nation.
No, but okay.
I want to push back because we didn't even remove them because we thought they were racist.
No, okay, but again, you're going down.
These guys were thieves. They stole our land. Colonialism. We need to reverse it. All these vices, all these things that they did, right? Which, you know, depending on which side of the fence you sit, whether they were criminal or not, but it is what it is, right? And you wanted to get rid of these people, and you did, right? Primarily driven by emotive reasons, not by production reasons. So I would have been a practical man, and a practical man would have said, that's all right. I understand that these guys are racist there, but I'm not going to kick them off the land. I'm not going to do that.
Doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white. If it catches mice, it's a good cat.
So, but I still need to address this other thing. And this other thing that I need to address, which is give a lot more people land, is I could have reduced the size of farms that these commercial farms had, right? Where they had 3 or 4, I would have said, you know what, just remain with one farm and the other
maximum
two,
size or
maximum size. We could have worked it out quite, proficiently, and would have still resettled a lot of black farms. And in fact, I would have used the racist farmers to start training. So you create these centers of excellence in each region where the racist farmer is still there, he's still producing, but now what he needs to do is to incorporate all the other people. Now, what we know is, whether you're racist or not, we know that people love money, right? And I'm being practical. All you just say to the guy is, if you do this, this is the benefit. And if you can see the benefit, that actually if I train these farmers around me, these are the benefits, then he would. And if he was still racist, believe you me, he would have left the country. But a lot of these racist white farmers left and went into North Africa, north of us. They went into Zambia, they went into Nigeria, right? Did they stop being racist when they went into Nigeria? Perhaps not, right? So I'm just being practical, that a lot of these ideological and philosophical questions, they're very good at the bar.
We are in a bar.
Yeah, this is where we must discuss them. But when you're in office...
I don't like the way you're impugning bars. I think
when you're in office, you need to be practical.
But Tinashe, and I think your point is clearly made.
Your doctor could be racist.
Your point is clearly made, but
they need your money.
But let's go back, and I like your argument. But let's combine that argument. So the basic premise of your argument is these guys were experts.
Unique experts, actually, in the world.
Can I now make my argument?
Okay.
Were/are experts. But the original question we're trying to answer was 20 years later. And if we're to believe Malcolm Gladwell, it takes 10,000 hours to master anything. And 10,000 hours is approximately 10 years of practice, working 8 to 5. And we know farmers don't. They work
a lot more.
So they'll achieve their 10,000 hours faster. So these guys, assuming they're working 8 to 5, 5 days a week, have achieved 20,000 hours, the new farmers. And they still haven't achieved...
So have you moved around the country? So it turns out that a lot of the farmers that were given land are still in the city center. They've never farmed. In those 20 years, they never even did anything.
They've never done anything on the
They've
farm.
got an offer letter, but they've never farmed, because it turns out... So even the model, the farming model, and let's be practical, right? Let's leave the philosophy outside of the door, and let's be practical. That
is this coming from
you make more money. Now, when we're in business, now we have to be practical. I leave my ideologies outside. You make more money.
That's why he hangs out in bars with us.
If you look at...
Does your pastor know you do this?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, we're supposed to preach the word to
the heathens.
Yes. Sit and drink with them and hope that one day they will turn, they'll see the error of their ways. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at farmland in Europe or in America, right, farming prices have actually been declining
Farming price or farm price?
Produce prices. So the commodities have actually over a 50-year period have actually been coming off, but the price per hectare of farmland has actually been increasing. So a lot of farmers actually made more money from their equity.
Selling the land.
Selling the land. Actually, there's a lot more money. And especially with, as you mechanize and you introduce more and more machinery, you find that the value of the land actually increases. Whereas in Zimbabwe, we reduced the value of the land to absolutely, zero. So if you think about it, land reform was necessary, was
Socially desirable.
Socially desirable. And what should have just happened was to be more practical about the realities. And being practical about the realities was, let's keep these people because actually it's a competitive advantage. Do you know what the competitive advantage of land was in Zimbabwe across Africa? Do you know what it was?
Probably skill.
No, it's not the skill. South Africans are better than us. Elsewhere, they're better than us. It was actually title. That across Africa, the only place where you could actually own the title. So you had people coming in from Austria, from Australia, from everywhere around the world saying, you know what, if I were to farm in Africa, if they were looking at the map of Africa and they were deciding it wasn't our soil. It was.
No, our soil is not very good.
It's actually
Our
not,
climate
it
is
turns
not very
out
good.
our climate is not that great. But actually when they considered Kenya or Zimbabwe, they decided to come here because they were like, well at least I can own my title.
The best place I could have gone was Burundi, but those guys were a bit busy hacking
You
each
see
other.
now. So because you had title, we then developed the competence of farmers who came here who had actually the love for farming. So you had a high concentration of unique farmers in Zimbabwe purely because of title. So when you remove title, you've destroyed the competence. And this happens all the time. You're a strategist, you know
you
this.
beg to differ?
Okay, so the point I was going to make, and he raised an interesting fact about, he made reference to farming globally. And, so if you think about the bastion of free market capitalism in the world, the US, when they talk about...
If you could choose to be born American, you would, wouldn't you?
No, of course not. I'm very proudly Zimbabwean.
All right.
But look, I think that if you're going to talk about... Look, I think if you want to talk about free market capitalism at the extreme, that's the example that you have to use. Because if you look at Europe today, they have social welfare. They're not like, they're a different kettle of fish.
You're meandering.
Anyway, the point I was going to make, so he would know this because he's an economist. When the Americans talk about the growth or decline in payrolls, they talk about non-farm payrolls. And there's an interesting historical tidbit behind that, which is, if you go back to 1800, 98% of the US population actually worked on farms. Okay? If you fast forward 100 years, it was slightly
5%.
below 50%, right? Today, it's about 2% of the population, right? So non-farm payrolls are literally the payrolls. Yes. Okay.
Farm payrolls are not irrelevant.
And when they think about this and analyze it, they don't think, oh my gosh, it's a tragedy that there are so few people working on farms. Because their farms, the density from a population perspective is so small because they're so highly capitalized, highly mechanized, super efficient. And they're the world's largest producer of maize. They're the world's largest producer of a lot of agricultural produce on the back of this, right? So we have a conceptual problem where we think that it's important for a huge percentage of our population to be engaged in this business of agriculture. And the reason why we think that is because we don't look at agriculture through the lens of the best standards in terms of yield per hectare, in terms of productivity, in terms of technology. We think about it from a peasant's perspective. That
Produce food.
this tiny piece of land
Must
is
feed
going to feed this family. And that's important. And so we, from a policy standpoint, we're in the wrong movie.
Okay, I'm going to stop you because you've just said some very wise words and you're about to dilute them. So you enjoy your Campari and we will go for a break. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
At a funeral in the rural areas,
There is a lot of work to be done. Fetching water, firewood, stones, bricks, and other things to save for Tonde. Tonde is sitting down where the elders are sitting. The young men are not happy with this because Tonde is the only one who knows everything that needs to be done. As the mourners wait for the body of the deceased that is still to come to the rural home, the elders are keeping him close and constantly consulting him.
Listen, guy. You see, among all these old men, nobody knows how your late brother's funeral policy works. Tonde here is a friend who works at Nyarazo. The friend is helping us with all the information, so we need Tonde close to us. You should be thanking Tonde because everything is circuitika nyore.
Neni Osekun, I just remembered that I have a friend at Nyarazo. Maybe I can help if Tonde can't find his phone.
Introducing Sawi, the chatbot from Nyarazo. Speak to Sawi for all your queries and inquiries. The benefits of having Sawi by your side are endless. When you need to know about our policy, Nyarazo products, payment platforms, claims, the Sawira International Plan, where to find the Nyarazo branches, Nyarazo contact details, how to apply, and any questions you may have. And she can help you find who you want to speak to. For your convenience, you can ask about anything, from our funeral services, counseling to your payments, and much more. Experience the benefit of having Sawi by your side. App Sawi today on WhatsApp number 0712 992 892. Nyarazo, Sawira Mukuru, Omgane Omkulu.
And we're back, and we'll save Tinashe going through another segment on agriculture.
Oh, thank you very much.
Since you're clearly fed up. So, over the past few weeks, we've had some interesting things happen. We touched on it last week. The Reserve Bank has made some moves. Finance Ministry has made some moves, and the rate looks a little bit stable. Interest rates have been hiked. There are no payments going out of the Ministry of Finance anyway. But now it looks, at least from our experience, or at least from my experience on a day-to-day basis, transactions are migrating to US dollar because people can't find the Zim dollar. Is this a good thing?
Of course not. This is so. I think that the action that the central bank and treasury has taken to make some dollars scarce is producing the obvious result, right? The power market rate is a function of supply and demand. So when you reduce the supply of Zim dollars, the demand for US dollars on that market falls and the rate retreats. So they're getting exactly the outcome that they're looking for. So,
but is it the right outcome that they should be looking for?
And this is an outcome that they has seduced them and has captured their imagination, and they're constantly aiming to achieve. The question that we should be asking ourselves is this success that they've achieved in the last 2 to 3 weeks, to what extent is it sustainable, right? Have they taken action that has addressed the fundamental problem?
But before we go to that, I mean, the question is, yeah, fundamental problem.
But that's what he's answering.
No, his question, fundamental problem is an issue we must go to. But, so we've halted the rate.
Yes, absolutely.
Have we created other worse problems?
Yes, absolutely.
Like?
When there are people who have already supplied government who haven't been paid, and if they supplied on the back of a Zim dollar loan, they're paying a high interest rate. So when these people are eventually paid, what do you think they're going to do? That's number one. Then number two, we have people who supplied winter crop, and we're looking into the summer crop. And these delays are not exactly the terms in which you want to go into the summer crop. So are the fertilizer guys, are they going to supply? And they're more likely to overshoot their rate if they do. Whoever is going to supply government now is likely to do so at a forward rate. That
pricing the risk.
Pricing the delayed systemic risk that is now in the payments structure. So yeah, no, I don't think, I think we've actually created a bigger problem and a bigger monster. And that monster, we're going to see it because right now they're benefiting from the US dollars that were inflows, right? So to his point, you've limited the supply of Zim dollars, but there was an inflow of US dollar. What's going to happen around October, November, when the inflow of US dollars actually dries up? Now you're creating a much bigger problem.
In October, November, the picture swings, right? So the tobacco tobacco money stops coming in, and supermarkets start stocking up for Christmas.
Yeah.
So there's a swing.
But you guys are looking at it from a fundamental perspective.
You answered fundamentally.
No, sorry, not from a fundamental, from the dynamic of supply and demand in the short term, right? And I think you're making a valid point. But I think what's even worse, fundamentally rather, is that if I was supplying government in good faith, I was happy with the price that I was quoted, it made sense for my business, and I'm supplying and I'm getting paid on time, and then I have this disruption, right? Where for whatever reason government has decided it's not wise to pay me as per our contract, right? And my business goes through all these issues, some of them Tinashe has articulated. I've got debt, I've got all these challenges that I'm going to experience. But when that's over, right, the next time I have the opportunity to be a supplier of government, right, in my mind, what is the risk profile of government as a customer?
Are you making the same point here?
No. What I'm saying, no, I'm making a different point.
I was waiting for the different point.
I'm making a different point. What I'm saying is, if
these are the problems of an empty stomach and alcohol.
So if George is my customer, and
okay, carry on. Okay, so now you're about to supply government.
The point I want to make is,
make sure it's different from my point.
For a lot of suppliers, in their mind, the risk profile of government is going to be different. So the margin that's going to make sense for them to supply government is different. If they're happy with 20% gross profit margin.
That's exactly what I said.
No, you didn't articulate it that way.
Okay, well, anyway.
If you are willing to take a 20% deposit up
so it means your forward rate
your pricing model is going to change. Okay.
Yes,
but
okay.
That's exactly
so you guys are making the same point. I spent my whole life saying this. But
you're not listening.
But
Why are you not listening?
But I think there's, if we are talking fundamentals, because you bent on talking fundamentals, the other issue we must talk about is a legal fundamental. So these contractors didn't make up their payment terms for themselves and engage unilaterally in those payment terms. There was an agreed contract between a supplier.
I don't think you wanna, as a contractor, I don't think you wanna go down that route.
So some might be forced to, when you force them to the point of bankruptcy, because I've got a contract that says you must pay me this money. I owe money to the bank.
You can discount it. There are lots of financial institutions that are willing to take up the. You're better off finding, because you know what, you don't want to go into.
No. But it's actually you're actually fleeing the fundamental point.
I'm saying if you're a government supplier.
So again, you guys are just stuck in your two worlds, right? So you're talking about the immediate consequences, and he's talking about the sort of long-term consequences. And I'm saying, okay, so let's engage him on the long-term consequences. If you've always supplied the government, or the world has always accepted that the government always pays, and the government always honors its obligations, and then all of a sudden the government shifts the rules and doesn't honor contracts, what does that do in the medium to long term for the government in its procurement and for the nation in general?
Okay, that already happened a long time ago. The reason why you have middlemen supplying, why you have tenderpreneurs supplying, there's no computer manufacturer, or there's no there's no one who's in the business who deals
Microsoft won't supply the government with
precisely because of these things.
issues.
So they always these middlemen who sit in the middle, who
And
put
price
on
it in.
and price it in. Because and none of them will ever take the government, because the worst thing that could ever happen to you if you're a supplier of government products is being kicked out of the system. Like that's the worst thing. So they're willing to go for 6 months without being paid, because actually it turns out that government understands these people, or maybe they're colluding, or maybe there's a cartel, but eventually government will pay and they will overpay. The point that we've already made is that eventually when they pay, government has to overpay. And that will have consequences on the entire monetary system. But legally and the process, there's a cartel. Whether in South Africa, Zimbabwe, anywhere else in the world, the reason why you have middle people, or middle brokers, middlemen, it's because, because a lot, it turns out that it's not just men, it's also women.
To the extent that
It's also women.
To the extent that we agree with what you're saying is, so if that's the reality, right? If you have a period of time where there are less disruptions, right? The tenderpreneurs will accept lower margins because it's easier.
They won't accept lower margins, but lower margins will be imposed on them. So,
price it in.
And I'll use some brand names because Ranga's not here, and he can get upset after we film. Let's go back to computers, right? The government can buy from Microsoft, it can buy from SAP, it can buy from Oracle. Let's say 2 of the 3 decide they're happy dealing with tenderpreneurs when it comes to Zim. They'll supply this middleman. If he makes his huge markup,
it's okay.
It's okay. But the third says, no, this smells funny, it's against all these policies and whatever, I'm not doing that. But there's a salesman responsible for Southern Africa who's knocking on his boss's doors all the time saying, but we should supply Zimbabwe, Then Zimbabwe goes for a 6-month, a 2-year period, a 3-year period, whatever, where his bosses start to say, okay, go there. And then he actually comes back with an order from the Zimbabwean government. He doesn't have a middleman to price in. So the other 2 on the next tender are going to have to reduce their prices. And the middleman is going to get squeezed and squeezed until
he can't operate.
He's squeezed out. Until the government is dealing with the actual principals themselves for all goods they're buying.
I think that's a private sector. In public sector, it will never happen. Even in the US or elsewhere, right? There's always a group of these people, brokers. In fact, a history lesson. Do you know where the idea of an entrepreneur comes from? Like the word entrepreneur.
I know it's French.
Yeah, it's middle contractors who were supplying the government,
the crown,
the crown, and they were very innovative, precisely because of these delays, these problems, these payment problems that governments usually have. One is a simple one. If you remember Napoleon, it's a simple one where you have to first go and raise the debt. So if you're Microsoft, you can't wait for government to first raise debt and go through its processes. So you always have these middlemen. Now the issue with Zim or in Africa is that the middleman is a cartel. It's a proper cartel. They understand each other. They know who to call. They know the language. So if you're IBM, if you remember the case, I think it was 10 years ago, when IBM was fined by, I think the US government or the European government for being corrupt or making payments in Africa. It's because there is no way IBM will supply a government in Africa directly. It will still go through a middleman. Now, where a government pays on time, continuously, what eventually happens is that you just squeeze the middleman.
Yeah.
But you don't, it's not like
you don't
government.
eliminate them completely. Okay,
you can't erase them completely.
Okay, fine.
Now,
anyway, so if everything that you're saying is correct, it doesn't change the point that George and I are trying to make, which is the more disruptive you are in
the bigger the
paying
premium.
consistently.
Yeah, no, we made that point already, like 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
I've been
so can we
listening attentively because I thought you guys are going to make a new point.
So can we
and you're not making a new
so can
point.
we move on?
That's my point.
There's something that I thought you would be more interested in discussing about these policy measures, which is the impact on aggregate demand.
Oh yes, that's what we should have started with, because I think
But you're getting yourself
everybody
segued into all these discussions about
I mean, especially at the beginning. I think, George, I think it's a real problem that we have now in our economy, where just aggregate demand is declining and rapidly declining.
What is aggregate demand? Sorry. You got to explain to the viewers.
Okay, so when we say aggregate...
when you do this, you should look at your camera.
Okay.
No, not that you mind looking at your camera.
Those are the least of Tinashe's problems.
No, absolutely.
He loves camera time.
Absolutely. So we're just aggregating. We're taking all the demand in the economy, because, remember, in the goods market, there's a supply and demand. And we're saying supply, we look at all the suppliers in the market. And then demand, we're looking at all the buyers in the market in Zimbabwe. And we are saying that, and the big buyers are government, consumers, and importers, right? From the other countries. So more our exports and importers internationally. Those are the big buyers. Consumers, if you look at Zim dollars, they're not earning that much. If you look at government, we know government is not paying, so it's not buying. If you look at diaspora remittances, that's actually increasing. So our exports are actually increasing. So that's still there.
Exports of our kids.
Yes, that's still there. But the two major ones, which are consumers and government. So what has happened is the aggregate demand has actually declined.
What do you think is driving that?
Well, first, salaries. Civil servants are paid in Zim dollars. And in Zim dollar terms, they're not keeping up with inflation. So they don't have as much consumptive income as they did a month ago or a year ago or 6 months ago. That's real. Government, we know the problems that government is making. It's just not buying. Consuming. It's not consuming.
The MPs don't have fuel in their cars. They're getting chucked out of hotels.
That's an interesting point that I want to take on further, but I'll let you.
So that's what we mean by aggregate demand, and aggregate demand is just not there. And if aggregate demand is not there, it means that aggregate output, so this is our GDP, must decline. It's going to decline.
So economic activity is coming off.
And that's a huge problem, because it now means that even though you have
that's a fancy way of saying that we're getting poorer.
No.
It's a fancy way of saying we're doing less work. The consequence of doing less work eventually is poverty.
Eventually.
But
if
first,
we're consuming less, we're poorer, guys.
No. You could be consuming less and saving more.
Direction of causation.
But you're consuming less because your income is less.
But the point that you're making, the very nature of your point, is not suggesting an increase in savings. Right? So you are speaking to consumption.
No, that's why we're just being precise.
Okay, we're getting into a rabbit hole.
Yeah, we're just being precise.
It's a direction of causation. What Tinashe
you guys don't like the idea that we're getting poorer.
No. What you're saying is the next step. What Tinashe is saying, first of all,
just directly.
First of all, a certain factory that used to make potato crisps, a certain number of potato crisps, and used to hire a certain number of day laborers every day and buy a certain number of potatoes from farmers every day, one day wakes up and their warehouse is full because nobody bought potato crisps, or they didn't sell as many potato crisps last week as they thought they would. So they're going to buy less potatoes this week. They're going to take less day laborers this week. Where you're right is if that happens for enough weeks.
If I'm a consumer of potato crisps and I can afford 2 packets a week and I'm down to 1, am I poor?
No, you're not. Not yet. And if you listen to what Tinashe is saying, the problem is not that you as an individual consumer can afford 1. The problem is the government used to buy lots of crisps. And then one day they just woke up and they said, we're not paying. In fact, we took some last week. We're going to send your invoice. We're going to look at it. We're going to think about whether to pay you. Just hold on to it. And then at the same time, where you could have said, you're the potato crisp manufacturer, you could have said to your farmers, okay, give me your potatoes. I'll hold on to them. And I will see what happens with the government. But the Reserve Bank has now said, if you buy those potatoes without an order, you're going to pay 200%.
No, I hear you. You're making a cogent point. Where I want to push back is to say,
can I
government is
simplify
such
for
a big
you?
player in the economy. If they, at a very high level, choose to buy less, the businesses and people who are behind supplying those goods and services who now, through no choice of their own,
become poorer,
cannot supply as much as they were doing last week or the week before. Are they not poor?
They will become poorer. So look,
No,
we're
let me make the. No, we're not. What's the difference between a recession and a depression? You're saying because it has started off as a recession, it's already a depression, and we're saying no. It's still a recession.
It can be fixed.
It can be fixed, but the recession, if it continues, will turn into a depression.
All right.
So it
That's
can
what
be
we're
fixed.
making.
So
that's the argument.
Okay, so nobody here is saying the government should be paying invoices at rates of, for argument's sake, 1,800, 2,000. Not saying that's what they were doing. But what I think Tinashe and I are agreed on is you can't just close the tap.
In fact, I can make a more succinct argument. As long as government is making payments from ZIMRA revenue, it's not inflationary. People forget this. It's not inflationary. When they're making payments from what's in the kitty, it's not inflationary at all.
100% I agree with
But when they stopped, because yes, there was inflationary, so there were two kinds of payments that they were making. There were proper payments, and then there is the inflationary payments. Now they stopped all payments. Well, close to all payments. That's the problem. Because there was a steady state of payments that they had to make.
And if you've ever ridden a bike, the hardest part of riding a bike is getting it going. You get on the saddle and you start pedaling. Once it gains
so
momentum.
it was not falling.
Once it gains momentum, it becomes easier. And the worst thing that can happen once you gain momentum is a complete stop. So we're not saying that the bike must be going at top speed all the time. That's also a dangerous thing. Slow it down by all means to a manageable speed, but an abrupt stop to get going again.
And don't blame everybody.
Look,
you see, the government, the signal that government is making is a wrong signal, where you almost blame all contractors.
What do you mean
No,
almost?
it's not. Well, that's what they've done, right?
They didn't almost blame all their suppliers. They blamed all their suppliers.
All the suppliers,
So there is a government department where there was a girl or a lady who every Monday went and got her petty cash and went to Pick and Pay and bought tea bags and bought sugar in a supermarket. That's been stopped. Because maybe the supermarket is overcharging us for sugar and tea bags.
It's crazy.
That's a big problem.
And this is a good place for us to stop. It's been lovely having you along. You guys, you should eat before you come on the show. You should eat better before you come on the show and improve your moods. But it's been lovely having everybody along. As usual, don't take us too seriously. We don't really know what we're talking about. What we are simply trying to do is to inspire discussions about things that we think matter, things that we think contribute to making a better Zimbabwe. And we hope that you have these discussions with the people around you, and if you have access to policymakers, you raise some of these issues with them. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it. Cheers.